Montana Territory, 1874. The wind pressed hard against the side of the bakery in Fort Benton as Helena Alder gripped the wooden counter, her hand trembling as she slid her wedding ring across it. "I need bread," she said, voice steady but eyes hollow. "Just enough for 2 days." The baker, a grizzled man with flour in his beard, looked from the ring to the 2 children standing behind her, skinny, quiet, and watching with the wide eyes of kids who knew too much too young. He sighed and pushed a cloth-wrapped loaf forward. "You sure?" Helena nodded once. "It is all I have." Her fingers closed around the warm bread, and she turned quickly before he could say anything else. The snow outside had started to fall again, light but steady. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and led the children down the muddy Main Street, past the saloon, the livery, and the jailhouse, toward the edge of town where the abandoned blacksmith's shed had become their shelter. "Is it still warm?" her daughter asked softly. "It is," Helena said, giving a small smile. "We will eat half now, half tomorrow." Her son, a boy just past 5, clung to her skirt. "Mama, do we have to stay in the shed again?" "We do, Kellen," she said gently, "but it will not be forever." She did not know if that was true. Her husband had been gone nearly 2 years, shot down in Kansas by a man who never gave his name. Since then, she had drifted west with the children until the money ran out, until there was nothing left to sell but the ring that once meant forever. But she still had her name. And she still had her children. They reached the shed just as dusk broke over the mountains, painting the sky in ash and rose. She closed the door behind them and set the bread between them on a wooden crate. They ate in silence, the way people do when they are too hungry for words. The knock came just as Helena was wrapping the children in blankets. It was not loud, but it was solid. A man's knock. She froze. Kellen stirred, whispering, "Who is it, Mama?" She crossed the room and eased the door open a crack. A man stood there, tall and dust-covered, with a broad chest and a long brown coat that had seen better days. His hat was pulled low, but she could see his eyes clear, steady, and watching her like he had been looking for someone. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "We do not need anything," he nodded once. "Apologies, ma'am, I saw you come from the bakery, looked like you were in need. I have some food if you'll take it, and I can build a fire if that stove still works." Helena hesitated. She did not know this man. But the wind was cutting through the cracks in the wall and the children were already shivering. "What is your name?" she asked. "Silas Avery," he said. "I am just passing through." She stepped back and opened the door. "Come in." He entered slow, careful not to make sudden moves. He set down his bag, pulled off his gloves, and crouched by the stove. Within minutes, the iron belly of it was glowing red, and warmth began to creep back into the room. He unpacked a wrapped bundle, salt pork, beans, dried apples. He looked at her then. "May I cook?" Helena nodded. "Yes." "Thank you." The children crept closer, drawn by the smell. Silas smiled at them but did not speak. He stirred the pot until the smell filled the shed and the boy leaned against his side without thinking. Helena watched. There was something quiet about Silas, not soft but calm. Like someone who had ridden through storms and knew how to wait them out. When the food was ready, he served them first. Helena ate slowly, her stomach unused to more than bread. The children devoured theirs and leaned against each other, full for the first time in days. Silas did not eat until they were done. Then he leaned back against the wall and looked at her. "You sold your ring," he said quietly. Helena flinched. "Yes. You should not have had to." Her voice was steady. "It fed my children. It was worth it." Silas nodded like he respected that deeply. "Do you have anyone?" he asked. "No," she said. "Just us." He looked at the children. "They are good kids." "They are strong," she said. "Stronger than they should have to be." The silence stretched, but it felt comfortable, not heavy. Silas reached into his coat and pulled something out. A small wooden carved horse. He handed it to Kellen without a word. The boy grinned, really grinned, and hugged it to his chest. Helena's throat tightened. Silas stood. "I will be back in the morning. There is work in town. I can get more food then." "You do not have to. I want to," he said. "Let me help." She searched his face. Why? His voice stayed low. Because you should not be alone in this, and I do not want to be alone either. He tipped his hat and stepped out into the snow. Helena stood there a long time, her heart beating fast in her chest. Kellen looked up at her. Do you think he will really come back? She stared at the door. I think he already has. By morning, the snow had turned wet and heavy, making the air thick with the scent of thawing earth. Helena stepped outside to gather kindling from the woodpile behind the shed. The children were still curled together beneath the patchwork blankets. She moved quietly, careful not to wake them. When she returned, Silas was already there, crouched by the stove with his coat dusted in fresh flakes. He glanced up as she entered, his face marked with fatigue but his hands steady as he lit the fire again. I brought flour, he said, unrolling a cloth bundle near the hearth. And lard. Figured you'd know better what to do with it than I would. Helena knelt beside him, fingers brushing the worn cloth. Where did you find work so early? Freight team needed help loading crates down by the levee, paid in coin and goods. I took the goods. She folded the cloth and set it aside. I can make biscuits. His eyes flicked to hers. Will you let me trade the coin for boots for your boy? He's walking barefoot. She hesitated, brushing dust from her skirt. Only if you let me mend your coat in return. Silas gave a single nod, more gesture than agreement, but something in his expression softened. By midday, the shed smelled of baking bread again, not the stale kind bought in desperation, but the kind that rose warm and real, filling even the corners of a home not meant to be one. Helena handed him a biscuit and sat across the room to sew the frayed lining of his sleeve. You came from Kansas, she said, threading her needle. I did. What sent you west? His jaw tightened just slightly. A boy, not mine by blood, but near enough. He passed last spring. I buried him in the Flint Hills. After that, I had no reason to stay. Helena looked down at the needle in her fingers. I'm sorry. Silas shook his head. He was sick a long time. I reckon he knew I'd keep going when he couldn't. She met his gaze. You're not just passing through, are you? He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, no, I was looking for something I didn't know how to name, but I think I've found it. Kellen stirred then, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. Silas, did you bring the horse? Silas reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a second carving. This one's smaller, smoother, shaped like a doe. For your sister, he said. Addie blinked, still half asleep, then reached for it without a word. Her fingers curled around the wood like it was something alive. Helena folded the coat and handed it back to him. You're good with your hands. I learned to make those for the boy. He liked animals, said they kept his mind off the pain. She stood slowly. You don't talk much about yourself. No reason to. Until now. Helena looked at her children, then at the man who'd brought warmth and food and carved animals without asking for anything in return. You're not what I expected, she said. I could say the same about you, he replied. She walked to the stove, took the last biscuit and broke it in half. She handed one piece to him. We'll need more wood before nightfall. I'll take care of it. And I'll boil water. The girls' boots are soaked through. He took the biscuit and held it for a moment. We make a good pair, you and I. Helena didn't answer, but her fingers brushed his when she took the empty tin from the floor. The touch lingered a second longer than it needed to. Outside, the snow began to melt into the soil, slow and steady. By the middle of the week, Helena found herself listening for Silas's footsteps before they reached the door. He never knocked anymore, just opened it slow, like the shed had already begun to belong to him too. He brought the children a handful of blackberries wrapped in a scrap of linen. Addie's hands were stained purple by evening. Helena sat beside him on the ground after the children had fallen asleep, their thin breathing soft beneath the quilts. A candle flickered on the crate between them, casting a low light across Silas's face. You always carry carving tools? She asked, watching the curl of wood fall from the small blade in his hand. I carry what I can't do without, he said. Some men pack whiskey, I carry cedar and a knife. She smiled faintly. Your hands don't look like a carver's. Used to punch fence posts along the Cimarron. My hands stayed stiff for 2 winters after that. She reached out, brushing her fingers along the base of his thumb where the skin was thickest. Still stiff. Not when I'm working wood. Only when I'm waiting. She let her hand fall, but the air between them stayed warm. The next morning, Silas didn't return until nearly noon. His shoulders were damp from snowmelt, and his expression was drawn with something she hadn't seen on him before. Worry, maybe, or the start of something heavier. Helena wiped her hands on her apron. "What's wrong?" He leaned against the doorframe and looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I found a better place." Her back stiffened. "You mean to leave?" "No," he stepped forward. "I mean for you and the children. There's a cabin half a mile from here, old trapper's place, been sitting empty since last spring. Roof holds. Woodpiles dry." "I spoke to the marshal, no claim on it." She stared at him, unsure what to say. "I can't let you keep sleeping on earth floors and brushing snow off your children's hair come morning," he said. "Not when there's something better. We can't pay for it. There's no price. Just someone willing to tend it." She looked past him to where the children were playing with the wooden animals near the fire. "Is it far?" "Close enough I could walk there blindfolded. I already swept it out." Her voice dropped. "Why are you doing all this?" He knelt beside her, resting his hands on his knees. "Because I know what it's like to lose your footing and not know where to put your next step, and because I see something here I didn't think I'd find again." She didn't speak, but her eyes glistened. That afternoon they packed what little they had into a feed sack. Kellen carried the carved horse proudly, and Addie tucked the dough into the front of her coat. Silas led the way, his stride steady through the thinning snow. The cabin stood beneath a stand of cottonwoods, its porch sagging but the hearth inside clean and whole. Helena ran her hand along the doorframe as they entered. It smelled of dust and old pine, but there was no rot, no dampness. Silas dropped the sack by the hearth. "We'll need to patch the window. I can do that tomorrow." Helena turned in the center of the room and looked at him. "Why do you stay?" He set his hat on the table and met her gaze. "Because I want to, and because I want you to want me here." She stepped closer. "You're not a man who asks for things." "No," he said, "but I'd ask for this if you'd let me." She reached for his hand, calloused and warm. "I'd like that," she said, and in the quiet that followed, no more words were needed. The hearth stood cold for now, but the space no longer felt like something borrowed. It felt like a beginning. The morning light in the cabin came in thin and golden, slipping between the shutter slats and landing across Helena's hands as she swept the hearth. Her shoulders moved slow but steady, the rhythm of someone used to cleaning spaces she didn't own until now. Outside, the wind had softened to a breeze, and the sky held the pale blue of early spring trying to root itself. Silas's boots sounded on the porch. He opened the door with one shoulder, balancing a small sack of oats in his arms. "I traded the last of the jerky for this," he said, setting it near the table. "Teamster heading south said prices'll rise once the river swells." Helena wiped her palms on her apron. "We can stretch it." "Addie's learning to soak the grains overnight. They cook softer that way." "She take to it easy?" he asked, pulling off his coat. "She watches first, then tries it her own way and gets mad when it works different." He chuckled low in his chest. "Sounds like someone I used to know in Missouri." Taught herself to ride cross-saddle and refused to go back, claimed she saw clearer that way. Helena tilted her head. "Sister? Cousin, raised together till she married off to a cooper in Sedalia. Told me not to write unless I had a real story." "Have you?" "Not till lately." She glanced toward the corner where Kellen sat with a stack of pine shavings trying to make a boat from leftover splinters. "They'll remember this," she said, "not the shed." "But here," Silas leaned against the doorframe, watching the boy's hands work. "That's the hope." The afternoon passed in quiet tasks. Silas patched the back window with cedar slats he'd cut himself tight-fitted and pegged without nails. Helena boiled the last of the salt pork into a thick stew while Addie washed their linens in the creek, pink fingers wringing water from cloth with more determination than grace. As the light dipped behind the cottonwoods, Helena stepped outside with a bucket and paused at the edge of the yard. Silas stood near the fence line, watching the tree line, his posture loose but alert. "Something out there?" she asked, approaching slowly. "Just listening. There's a rhythm to the land out here. Animals move different when weather shifts." She followed his gaze. "Do you miss anything east of here?" He didn't answer right away. Then I missed the boy's voice. He used to hum when he thought no one could hear, tunes he made up, never the same twice. Helena stepped closer. "What was his name?" "Emery," she nodded. "He sounds like he was well loved. He was all the good I had left in me. When he passed, I thought that was it. No more pieces to give." Helena drew in a breath, slow and even. "And now? I look at your girl trying to fold sheets with one arm shorter than the other, and your boy carving that boat like it's got someplace to go. And you quiet but carrying everything anyway. And I think maybe there's still something left in me." She reached for the fence rail, her hand settling beside his. "You've given more than you know." Silas turned, resting his hand lightly over hers. "I didn't come looking for a family again. I didn't expect anyone to offer one." Neither moved away. He spoke again, voice lower now. "I've seen women make peace with solitude, but you keep making room for your children, for me." "I never meant to stop living," she said softly. "Just didn't know how to begin again." Silas looked at her, not searching, just seeing. "Then let's begin." Helena didn't speak. She didn't have to. When they returned to the cabin, the shutters were pulled, the stew was ready, and Addie had laid out 4 carved animals in a neat line on the table. 2 belonged to her and Kellen. The other 2 were new. Helena looked at them, then at Silas. "She made room too," he said. The fire crackled behind them. The cabin no longer felt like shelter, it felt like soil. Something was growing here now, slow and sure. The thaw came fully by April, loosening the ground and calling green back into the fields. Helena stood at the edge of the cabin yard with her skirts tucked high, sleeves rolled, fingers sunk into the soil. Silas had dug the first furrow that morning and was now mending the handle of the hoe with a strip of leather and a quiet patience that came naturally to him. "We'll plant beans first," she said without looking up. "Then carrots if the seed's still good." He glanced at her. "You think it'll hold?" "It will if we keep it covered at night." A breeze lifted the edge of her headscarf. She pushed it back down with the back of her wrist and sat back on her heels. "You ever had a garden before?" she asked. "Once," he said. "Didn't have much luck. Soil was rock and wind wouldn't let anything take root. Then this one's yours to try again." He nodded and leaned into the handle, driving it deep into the earth. Addie and Kellen were down by the stream, collecting smooth stones for the garden border. Their voices filtered back in bursts, laughter and argument, both familiar and safe. Helena stood and brushed the dirt from her palms. "I'll go check the water line. It runs faster this time of year." "I'll come with you," he said, setting the hoe aside. The walk to the stream was quiet. Silas's hand brushed hers once, and she didn't pull away. When they reached the bend, she knelt by the edge and let her fingers test the flow. "It's clean," she said. He crouched beside her, his boots sinking into the soft bank. "There's a stillness here I didn't think I'd be able to live with. But it doesn't feel like silence, it feels like waiting." She dipped her hand again. "Waiting for what?" "For something to grow, something worth tending." Helena tilted her head toward him. "You think this is it?" "I know it," he said. "I've seen things break without repair. But this," he looked at the cabin, then at her. "This is mending." She leaned against his shoulder, the weight of it quiet and sure. "You've done more than you owed." "I don't owe, Helena, not anymore. I choose." They stayed that way until the sun reached its highest point, then walked back slow, the stream at their backs. Addie ran ahead to show them a bird's egg she'd found, nestled in a twist of moss. Kellen clutched a stone shaped like a heart, proud and breathless. That night, Helena sat by the fire and stitched a hem while Silas carved. The children slept nearby, arms flung wide over the quilts. A kettle simmered low, and the room held the scent of thyme and clean linen. Silas looked up. "You ever think of teaching again?" She folded her needle into the fabric. "Sometimes, but I've found more in these past weeks than I ever had in a classroom. Maybe I was meant to teach something smaller, slower, Like how to keep a hearth steady, or how to let someone in, she said. He set the carving down a bird in mid-flight, wings arched. You've let me in, she met his eyes, and you stayed. He crossed the space between them and knelt in front of her. I would have walked past this place if not for you, but now I can't imagine going anywhere else. Her fingers found his. Then don't. He kissed her hand, soft and deliberate. I won't. The next morning, they hung the carved bird above the door. Helena tied a ribbon to its neck, the same blue as the sky that day. The children danced barefoot through the garden rows, and Silas started building a bench for the porch. In the weeks that followed, the seeds took root. The carrots came up first, their greens delicate but strong. The beans curled around the poles Silas had shaped, climbing higher each day. Neighbors from the edge of town began to stop by. A widow brought a basket of early apples. A trapper offered hens in exchange for mended shirts. Helena taught Addie how to barter and Kellen how to split kindling without splintering his thumb. One evening, as twilight stretched across the fields, Silas took Helena's hand and led her to the porch. I've got something, he said. She sat beside him, her braid damp from washing. What is it? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside was a band of polished oak, smoothed and shaped to her finger. I know what this means, he said, and I don't offer it lightly, but I know what I've found here. I want to build on it. She took the ring, turned it once in her palm, and then slid it on. Then let's build. They were married under the cottonwoods, with Kellen holding the ribboned bird and Addie scattering wildflowers. The marshal said the words, and Helena said yes like it had always been waiting on her tongue. Years passed. The cabin grew. A second room, a proper stove, a porch swing Silas built one late summer afternoon when the wind was too soft to ignore. Addie learned to read by lamplight, and Kellen carved his own animals now, lining them along the windowsill in tidy rows. And every night when the fire burned low and the children slept, Helena leaned into Silas's side, her hand folded over his. They didn't speak much in the dark. They didn't need to, they had weathered what came before. Together they had planted something deep, and every day it grew.